Sophie Brennan's body hit Maya's arms 45 feet down. The sound was something no one on that sidewalk would ever forget. Bones shattering, a shoulder exploding out of its socket with a wet, grinding crack that made the geometry of the human body look wrong. A woman pushing a stroller 20 feet away doubled over and vomited on the concrete. A man in a business suit froze mid-step, his coffee slipping from his fingers, shattering on the ground in a brown splash that nobody noticed because every set of eyes on Anderson Street had locked onto the two figures crumpled on the pavement. Maya couldn't breathe. Couldn't move her right arm. It hung dead at her side, twisted at an angle that defied anatomy. The shoulder joint displaced so completely that the arm no longer looked like it belonged to the same body. Dislocated, maybe fractured, definitely destroyed. But Sophie was screaming, alive, wailing with the full-throated terror of a 4-year-old who had just experienced free fall and landing and the incomprehensible violence of gravity interrupted by a stranger's body. 4 adults had walked past this building in 90 seconds, while Sophie climbed out a third-floor window onto a rusted fire escape with no railing. 4 people had looked at their phones, adjusted their earbuds, quickened their pace. Because someone else would handle it, someone always handles it. That was the lie the world told itself every time a child needed help. And the nearest adult decided they were too busy, too distracted, too convinced that responsibility belonged to someone with a different job title. Maya looked up. Maya ran. Maya destroyed herself. Maya saved a stranger's child. Because 18 months ago, her 5-year-old sister Emma fell from a burning building. And Maya wasn't fast enough. This time she was. The pain arrived like a tide. Not all at once, but in waves, each one higher and hotter than the last, radiating from the destroyed shoulder through her ribs and into her skull, until every heartbeat was a detonation behind her eyes. Maya couldn't feel her legs. Couldn't feel anything except the weight of Sophie pressed against her chest and the screaming agony that was turning her vision white at the edges, collapsing the world into a narrowing tunnel with Sophie's terrified face at the center. "Don't move her," a man's voice. Deep, urgent, somewhere above and to the left. "Don't move the kid. Someone call 911. But Maya was already moving, rolling onto her left side, cradling Sophie with her good arm, because the impact had knocked the wind out of the little girl and her lips were turning blue and she needed to breathe. Maya pressed Sophie against her chest, felt the tiny ribcage fight to expand once, twice, and then Sophie screamed, high-pitched, terrified. The kind of wailing that shatters glass and breaks hearts and tells you the only thing that matters. Crying means breathing. Breathing means alive. "I've got you," Maya whispered. Her own voice sounded wrong. Broken. Like someone had disassembled it and put it back together with missing pieces. "I've got you. You're okay. You're okay." Sophie's mother appeared out of nowhere. The way mothers do when their children scream, summoned by some frequency that only they can hear. Some gravitational pull that bends time and distance and brings them running from whatever corner of the world they happen to occupy. Jennifer Brennan hit the sidewalk at a full sprint, her phone clattering across the concrete, her face drained of every shade of color until it was just bone-white terror and eyes so wide they looked like they might never close again. Sophie. Oh God. Sophie. Jennifer dropped to her knees beside them. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't coordinate her movements. She reached for her daughter, pulled back, reached again. The instinct to grab warring with the terror that touching might cause more damage, that her daughter might be broken in ways she couldn't see. Is she? She's breathing, Maya said. She let Jennifer take Sophie, watch the mother gather her child against her chest. Hands running over Sophie's arms. Legs, skull, spine, checking for breaks, for blood, for the damage that falling 45 feet onto concrete should have caused, but somehow impossibly hadn't, because Maya's body had absorbed the impact instead. She's crying. That's good. Crying is good. Jennifer looked at Maya for the first time. Really looked. Saw the jacket 3 sizes too large, sleeves hanging past her fingertips, collar frayed to thread, zipper broken and held shut with a safety pin. Saw the duct tape wrapped around the sneakers where the rubber had separated from the canvas gray strips layered over gray strips, and the desperate engineering of someone who couldn't afford new shoes and couldn't afford to go barefoot. Saw the way Maya was cradling her right arm against her chest, the shoulder hanging at an angle that made Jennifer's stomach turn. You caught her. You caught my baby. Maya nodded. Couldn't speak anymore. The adrenaline was draining out of her like water from a cracked vessel, and the pain was rushing in to fill every empty space. Hot and sharp and all-consuming. "I need to call an ambulance," Jennifer said. She was crying now, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face, still holding Sophie, still checking her daughter over and over as if injuries might materialize later, might be hiding somewhere she hadn't thought to look. "You're hurt. Your shoulder." "No." The word came out too fast, too panicked. Maya tried to stand, made it halfway up before her legs buckled, and she went down on one knee, gasping. "No ambulance, no hospital. I'm fine. You're not fine. Your shoulder is..." "I said no." The tone stopped Jennifer mid-sentence. It wasn't anger, it was terror. Pure distilled practice terror. The voice of someone who had learned through brutal repetition that hospitals meant questions. Questions meant authorities. Authorities meant being returned to a place worse than any street. A place with concrete walls and locked doors and a woman who smiled with clinical precision while children starved in rooms she had sealed shut. A motorcycle engine cut through the moment. Deep rumble, then silence. Bootsteps on concrete. Heavy measured the stride of someone who had learned to move through chaos without adding to it. Everybody okay here? Marcus Hale, though Maya didn't know his name yet, stood 6 feet away, helmet under one arm. Eyes already sweeping the scene with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent decades sorting catastrophe into manageable categories. He was 52 years old. Built like 30 years of physical labor had been chiseled into his frame, and then weathered by time and hard choices. He wore a leather vest that said Iron Wolves MC across the back and faded silver stitching. Gray threaded through his beard in streaks that mapped the years since he had stopped caring what his reflection looked like. Tattoos covered both forearms, ink faded to blue-green, telling stories that only people who had lived similar lives could read. The kind of man who made pedestrians cross the street without knowing exactly why. The kind of man whose voice, when he chose to make it gentle, could stop a frightened child from running. "Ma'am, is your daughter hurt?" Jennifer clutched Sophie tighter. "I don't know, I don't think so. She fell. From the fire escape. 3rd floor, this girl caught her. Ghost." That was what his brothers called him. A road name earned in the years after he left the military police, after he walked away from a career that had shown him exactly how institutions designed to protect the vulnerable could be weaponized against them instead. He shifted his attention to Maya, and it took him 3 seconds to read everything. The way she was guarding that shoulder with the intensity of someone protecting something more important than a joint. The fear in her eyes that went deeper than physical pain, deeper than the moment, all the way down to something foundational and old. The calculation happening behind those eyes, measuring exits, assessing threats, deciding whether to run. He had seen that look before. In military housing where a commander's children walked with bruised arms and rehearsed explanations. In precinct interview rooms where teenagers described horrors in flat, dead voices, because feeling anything would annihilate them. In the eyes of an 8-year-old girl named Shaina who had told him her stepfather was hurting her and whose death 6 months later had shattered something inside Marcus Hale that 9 years of living had never been able to repair. "What's your name?" he asked Maya. She didn't answer immediately. Watched him the way feral animals watch. Waited to see what he would do with the information, whether this kindness was a trap, whether gentleness was a prelude to something worse. Maya, I'm Ghost. I need you to let me look at that shoulder." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. That's a dislocation at minimum. Maybe a fracture. You need medical attention. I can't go to a hospital. Why not?" The silence stretched between them. Jennifer was still on the ground with Sophie's phone in her hand. 911 dialed but not yet pressed. Waiting. 2 other pedestrians had stopped forming a small audience at a safe distance. Maya's breathing accelerated. Her eyes darted to the gaps between buildings, calculating routes, measuring how far she could run on legs that could barely hold her upright. "'Cause they'll send me back." The words came out flat, dead. The emotional register of someone describing the weather, not the catastrophe of their life. "I don't have ID. No insurance card, no guardian. The hospital will call the facility. Director Mercer will tell them I'm a runaway. That I'm emotionally disturbed. That I hurt myself for attention." Her voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. "I've seen her do it to other kids. Nobody believes us. Nobody ever believes us." Ghost felt something cold settle into his chest. The same cold he had felt 9 years ago standing in a military hearing room watching a commanding officer explain with perfect bureaucratic composure why the report about Shaina had been misfiled, a process incorrectly lost in a system designed to lose things that inconvenience powerful people. The cold of recognition. The cold of knowing instantly and completely that the machine built to protect children was grinding another one to dust. "How long have you been running? 2 weeks. Where have you been sleeping?" Maya's jaw tightened. The muscles working beneath skin stretched too thin over bones that shouldn't have been so visible in a 14-year-old girl. Subway stations. Sometimes the park, if the weather holds. There's a spot under the overpass on 9th Street where security doesn't check after midnight. If you time it right, you can sleep 4 hours before the early shift comes through. Jennifer made a small involuntary sound. Horror mixed with guilt, mixed with the dawning realization that this girl, this homeless, starving, broken girl with duct tape on her shoes, and no one in the world who knew where she was, had been the only person on the entire street willing to run toward her falling daughter. "You've been sleeping under a bridge for 2 weeks, Jennifer said slowly, "and you still stopped to catch my baby." "I couldn't just watch." Maya's voice cracked. She swallowed hard, pulled the words back together. Not again. I couldn't watch again. Again, Ghost asked quietly. Maya's good hand went to the pocket of her oversized jacket, pulled out a photograph. Wallet-sized school picture bent at the corners, faded from constant handling the lamination and peeling, where her thumb had rubbed the surface 10,000 times. A little girl, maybe 5 years old. Gap-toothed smile so wide it pushed her cheeks up into her eyes. Hair in pigtails tied with yellow ribbons. Eyes full of the kind of trust that only exists before the world teaches you to be afraid. Emma Maya whispered. My little sister. She was 5. She stopped, swallowed, started again. Apartment fire. 18 months ago, middle of the night. I woke up to smoke so thick I couldn't see my hand. I got out through this bedroom window, fire escape. But Emma's room was at the other end of the hall. I tried to go back. The firefighters pulled me away. Said the building was collapsing. Said the stairwell was gone. Said I'd die in 30 seconds if I went back in. She was on the 3rd floor. I could hear her calling my name through the smoke, and then she stopped calling. Maya's eyes filled, but no tears fell. As if her body had learned that crying was a luxury she could not afford. As if the tears had been systematically trained out of her by 14 months in a facility that called emotion a behavioral issue and prescribed medication for grief. Emma died while I was standing on the sidewalk doing nothing. Ghost felt something shift deep in his chest. A tectonic movement. The kind of internal rearrangement that happens maybe 3 or 4 times in a life when something you hear reorganizes the way you understand the world. This wasn't just a girl who had caught a falling child. This was a girl reaching back through time trying to rewrite the worst moment of her existence. Trying to catch the sister she couldn't save by saving a stranger's daughter instead. Sophie felt just like Emma Maya continued. Her voice was barely audible now, a frequency meant only for the photograph in her hand and the ghost it represented. Same weight, same size, same terrified eyes. But this time I was fast enough. This time I didn't freeze. This time the child lives. Jennifer was crying openly now. Sophie had stopped wailing and was making small hiccuping sounds against her mother's shoulder, the aftershocks of terror gradually softening into exhaustion. Ghost pulled out his phone, speed dialed a number he hadn't called in 8 months. Not because the friendship had faded, but because some calls only get made when the world demands it. Tank answered on the 2nd ring. Her voice was gravel and steel, the voice of someone who was always ready and always listening. Talk to me. I need the wolves. All of them. I'm at 1634 Anderson Street. I've got a situation. What kind of situation? The kind that involves a 14-year-old girl who just saved a kid's life and broke her own shoulder doing it. She has been running from Parkside for 2 weeks sleeping rough. And she just told me things about Director Mercer that need immediate attention. 3 seconds of silence. In those 3 seconds, Ghost knew Tank was already processing, categorizing, making decisions at a speed that only 12 years of detective work and a lifetime of refusing to look away could produce. Sarah Kowalski had spent those 12 years watching cases get buried and children get sacrificed to institutional convenience. She didn't waste time on questions that could wait. We're coming. Ghost hung up, looked at Maya, made a decision that would reshape both their lives in ways neither of them could have predicted or prepared for. He pulled off his leather vest, the cut. 11 years of brotherhood stitched into leather and patches. The Iron Wolves MC rocker across the back, the road name embroidered above the heart. Every mile of highway at 3 in the morning, every funeral where brothers stood in formation, every late-night ride to outrun the ghosts that followed him home from military courtrooms and precinct offices. He draped the vest carefully over Maya's shoulders, mindful of the destroyed joint, adjusting it so the weight fell on her good side. You see this? His voice carried weight now. Authority. Promise. The voice of a man making a vow he intended to keep with his life if it came to that. This means you're under the protection of the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club. This cut on your shoulders means 200 brothers and sisters just became your family. Nobody touches you. Nobody takes you back to that place. Nobody hurts you. Not Parkside, not Director Mercer, not anyone. Maya stared at him. The vest was warm, heavy. It smelled like leather and engine oil and road dust and something she couldn't name but that her body recognized as safety. The weight of it on her shoulders felt different from every other weight she had carried. This one felt like armor, like a door locking from the inside for the first time in 18 months. Why would you do this for someone you just met because you saved a stranger's child and destroyed yourself doing it? Because you've been invisible for 2 weeks and you're still putting other people first. Because I am tired of watching kids fall through cracks that adults dig deeper by pretending they don't exist. He crouched down so they were eye level, close enough that she could see the damage in his eyes. The scars that didn't show on skin but lived in the way he held himself and the careful gentleness of a man who knew exactly how much strength could hurt. I lost someone too. Not a sister. A witness. 8-year-old girl named Shaina. who told me her stepfather was hurting her. I was military police. She trusted me. I filed the report, did everything by the book, followed every protocol. Command buried it because the stepfather was a lieutenant colonel with 20 years of service and a letter of commendation from the base commander. His jaw tightened, the muscles working beneath the gray beard. She died 6 months later. Official cause was accidental fall. Unofficial cause was that I trusted a system designed to protect itself instead of the children it was supposed to serve. I didn't push hard enough. I filed the paper and went home and told myself I'd done my job. An 8-year-old girl died because doing my job wasn't the same as doing enough. Maya's eyes widened. Recognition. The shared language of people who have watched institutions fail the vulnerable and carry the guilt of that failure like shrapnel embedded too deep to remove. So, when I say you're protected, Ghost continued, his voice dropping to a register that vibrated with 9 years of rage and purpose, and the desperate need to get it right this time, I mean it. When I say we're not letting you disappear back into that system, I'm making a promise I will die keeping. Do you understand me? Maya nodded slowly. Something in her chest loosened. Not all the way, not even close, but enough to let a fraction of the terror drain away and make room for something she had almost forgotten existed. Hope, small and battered and barely alive, but present. Mr. Ghost, Jennifer stood up still, holding Sophie. What do you need from me? Be a witness. You saw what she did. You saw that shoulder break. When the police come asking questions and will you tell them exactly what happened? This kid ran when 4 adults walked past. This kid is a hero. That matters in courtrooms. That matters in custody hearings. Jennifer nodded. Her eyes were fierce now. The terror had transformed into something harder, something with edges. I'll tell them. I'll tell everyone who'll listen. Ghost pulled out his phone again. Different number. Doc, it's Ghost. I need you at 1634 Anderson. Bring your full kit. I've got a 14-year-old with a dislocated shoulder, possibly fractured, who cannot go through official channels. Can you do a field reset? How bad? Bad enough that she's been holding it together for 20 minutes without passing out. She's 14 years old, and she's tougher than most adults I've worked with. But she's about 2 minutes from shock, and I need you here before that happens. 10 minutes. Ghost looked at Maya. Doc is coming. Elena Marsh, former Army combat medic. 8 years in field hospitals overseas before she retired. She's going to reset that shoulder. It's going to hurt worse than anything you've ever felt for about 15 seconds. And then the worst of it will be over. Will she report me? Doc doesn't report to anyone except her own conscience. And her conscience says kids who save other kids deserve medical care, not interrogation. Maya's shoulders relaxed. The good one and the destroyed one. Just enough to show Ghost that somewhere beneath 18 months of learned distrust and institutional betrayal, this girl still had the capacity to believe in something. Still had a small, stubborn piece of hope that hadn't been extinguished yet. I don't understand, she said. 4 people walked past this building while Sophie was climbing out that window. You're the 5th person. Why did you stop? Ghost was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the accumulated weight of 30 years of mistakes and the lessons they had taught him at a cost he was still paying. Because I didn't stop the first time. Because I filed a report about Shaina and went home and poured a drink and told myself the system would handle it. Because an 8-year-old girl died while I was convincing myself that following procedure was the same as doing the right thing. He looked at Maya with eyes that held nothing back. No calculation, no agenda, just the raw, unfiltered determination of a man who had failed once and would break himself in half before he failed again. You don't get many second chances in this life. When one shows up, you take it with both hands and you hold on until your fingers break. You stopped for Sophie. I'm stopping for you. That's how it works. That's how it's supposed to work. The sound of motorcycles started in the distance. Low rumble building to a growl, building to thunder. Growing closer, multiplying, one engine becoming 5, becoming 12, becoming a wall of sound that vibrated in Maya's ribcage and rattled the windows of every building on Anderson Street. By the time Doc arrived in her dark green SUV, there were 12 bikes parked along the block. By the time Doc finished examining Maya's shoulder, photographing the injury from every angle, documenting the malnutrition that had thinned her arms to sticks, noting the defensive scars on her wrists that told stories of restraints and razor wire and desperate midnight escapes, there were 37. And by the time Maya finally broke down and told them everything about Parkside, about Director Mercer, about the locked reflection room and the starvation rations and the white van that came in the night, and the children who climbed into it and were never seen again, there were 53. 53 motorcycles. 53 men and women who had dropped everything, canceled plans, driven through traffic, because Ghost had called and said a kid needed help. That was all they needed to hear. The kid needed help. They came. Doc worked on Maya's shoulder in Ghost's apartment 3 blocks from Anderson Street. Jennifer had insisted on coming, bringing Sophie, who had been checked by paramedics on scene and cleared with nothing but bruises and a story she would tell for the rest of her life. Sophie kept asking why the nice girl was crying, because sometimes saving someone hurts, Jennifer told her daughter, smoothing Sophie's hair with a hand that had finally stopped shaking. But we'd do it anyway. Doc positioned Maya's arm, gave her a leather strap to bite down on. On 3, Doc said. 1. She pulled and rotated on 2. The sound of bones sliding back into the socket made half the people in the room wince and look away. Maya gasped bit down on the leather until her jaw ached, absorbed 15 seconds of blinding, all-consuming agony without making a sound louder than a strangled exhale. Took it. Survived it. The way she had survived everything else. By clenching her teeth and enduring. Brave girl, Doc said. Then she started documenting everything else. The bruises on Maya's forearms in various stages of healing, yellow and purple and green, a calendar of violence written on skin. The scrapes on her knees from sleeping on concrete, the burns on her palms from climbing through a bathroom window at midnight because she had been locked inside for 14 hours with no food, no water, no access to a toilet, and the only exit had old razor wire on the outside that shredded her hands as she pulled herself through. These photos are evidence, Doc said. Time-stamped, witnessed, admissible in any court in this country. Whatever happens next, we have proof of what they did to you. Tank arrived at 6:47 in the evening. Sarah Kowalski walked into Ghost's apartment the way she walked into every room. Eyes-moving processing already 3 moves ahead. She was 47 years old. 5'6" of controlled intensity compressed into a leather vest and steel-toed boots. She had been an NYPD detective for 12 years before leaving because watching one more case get buried by departmental politics. While one more child disappeared into a system built to protect the adults running, it would have destroyed whatever was left of the person she needed to be. She sat down across from Maya at Ghost's kitchen table. The apartment was packed. Wolves lining the walls, sitting on counters filling the hallway, standing on the fire escape because there wasn't enough room inside for 53 people, but none of them were willing to leave. Tell me about Parkside, Tank said. Not a demand, an invitation. The tone of someone who knew that the difference between interrogation and conversation was the difference between shutting a witness down and opening them up. And Maya did. She told them about the room she shared with 3 other girls. 9 feet by 12 feet, 4 metal frame beds pushed against walls that hadn't been painted since the facility opened, 1 window sealed shut with layers of paint so thick it had become structural, fire code violation that no inspector had ever cited, because no inspector had ever been shown that room during a visit. She told them about the food, how meals came at fixed times, and if you missed breakfast at 6:30 because you were sick or because you had been locked in the reflection room overnight, you simply did not eat until lunch at 11:30. 5 hours with nothing. How portions shrank every month as the budget got cut and cut again. How the kitchen staff member who raised concerns about children losing weight was terminated within 2 weeks. She told them about the reflection room, 6 feet by 8 feet. Concrete walls, concrete floor, 1 camera mounted in the upper corner with a red light that blinked without stopping, without mercy. The mechanical eye of a system that watched but never intervened. No windows, no furniture, no blankets, no toilet. Director Mercer called it a therapeutic de-escalation environment, a calm space for emotional regulation. The kids called it the box. Maya had been locked in there for 14 hours once. Her crime was asking why her grandmother was not allowed to visit. She told them about Director Diane Mercer, Ph.D. in social work from a respected university, 20 years in child welfare administration, awards from the governor, commendations from the city, published papers on trauma-informed care that were cited in graduate programs across the country, the kind of resume that made oversight boards nod with satisfaction, the kind of smile that made inspectors feel comfortable, the kind of clinical vocabulary that could transform abuse into treatment plans and starvation, into nutritional optimization, and solitary confinement into structured therapeutic reflection. And then Maya told them about the van. White cargo van. No windows in the back. I saw it 7 times in 6 months. Always late at night, 10, 11 o'clock, sometimes later. A staff member would go to one of the rooms, wake up a kid. Usually one of the quiet ones. The ones who had been there the longest, the ones who had stopped asking questions because asking questions got you locked in the box and left there until you learned that silence was survival. They would tell the kid they were being transferred. Therapeutic foster placement. Better environment, more support, more freedom. They made it sound like a reward for good behavior, like something you should be grateful for. Maya's voice had gone flat. The emotional register of someone describing events so terrible that allowing herself to feel them would be annihilation. The kid would get in the van, sometimes with a bag, sometimes with nothing except the clothes they were wearing. The van would pull away from the building, and that kid would never come back, never call, never write, never appear in any log or file or database I could access. Just gone, erased, like they had never been born. Did you ever see any of those kids again? Tank asked. Her voice was carefully neutral, but under the table her hands were clenched into fists so tight her knuckles had gone white. No, never. And when I asked where they went, Director Mercer would give me that smile. That specific smile she had. Patient, condescending, almost amused. The smile of someone explaining something obvious to someone too damaged to understand. She would say confidentiality protects the children. She would say families deserve privacy during sensitive transitions. She would say my concern was admirable but misplaced. How many kids, 7, that I know about? Maybe more before I arrived. Maybe more after I left. Maybe more during the nights I was locked in the box and couldn't see who came and went. The room went silent. 53 people processing what they had just heard. The air changed. Something collective shifting from concern to rage to cold, focused, unshakable purpose. Ghost's voice cut through the quiet. We need Reaper. James Mitchell arrived at 7:15, 49 years old. Former IRS Criminal Investigation Division. 22 years of federal service tracing money through systems designed to hide it, following the financial fingerprints of people who believed they were clever enough to steal from the government and the vulnerable simultaneously. His wife's illness had forced early retirement, but the instincts remained. The ability to look at a column of numbers and see the crime hiding between them. He listened to Maya's story without interrupting, asked 3 precise questions, then pulled out his laptop and began working. I'm reaching out to my former colleagues at the Bureau, he said. Financial crimes and crimes against children. If Director Mercer is placing kids with unlicensed individuals while continuing to bill the state for their care, we're looking at wire fraud, theft of government funds, and child trafficking under federal statute. He stepped into the hallway with his phone. Came back 15 minutes later with an expression that dropped the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. They're interested. Very interested. But they need more than one witness's testimony to move. They need patterns, financial documentation, corroborating witnesses, a trail they can follow from the money to the director and from the director to the missing children. Tank looked around the room. 53 brothers and sisters standing shoulder to shoulder in a 2-bedroom apartment because a stranger had called and said a child needed help. Then we get them what they need. Ghost looked at Maya. She was sitting in the corner of his couch wearing his vest over her thin shoulders, Doc's sling, cradling the arm that had caught Sophie Emma's photograph clutched in her good hand. She looked like exactly what she was. A child who had been failed by every institution designed to protect her, who had survived by becoming invisible, and who had made herself visible again by running toward a falling stranger. Are you willing to fight? He asked her, because what comes next won't be easy. Director Mercer has awards, she has connections. She has 20 years of credibility built on the backs of children who are too scared to speak. Fighting back means going on record. Means telling your story to people who have the power to change things but might not have the will. Means reliving every locked door and missed meal and hour in that concrete room. Maya touched Emma's photograph. Traced the outline of her sister's face with the pad of her thumb the way she had done 10,000 times before. The pigtails, the yellow ribbons, the smile that had trusted the world completely and been wrong. I'm tired of being invisible, Maya said. I'm tired of watching kids disappear and telling myself there's nothing I can do about it. I'm tired of adults who see exactly what's happening and choose silence because silence is easier than action. She looked at Ghost with eyes that had seen too much for 14 years but still held something unbroken at the center. You said I'm protected now. I meant it. Then I'll fight. For me, for Emma, for the 7 kids who got in that van and never came back. Tank stood. Church meeting. Tomorrow at dawn. Every chapter within 200 miles. We're going to find those children. And we're going to make sure Diane Mercer never touches another kid as long as she lives. The room moved. Phone calls made. Messages sent across state lines and through the night. The machinery of the Iron Wolves mobilizing with the efficiency of a military operation because half of them had served in the military, and the other half had learned discipline through harder roads. But it was Reaper who dropped the first bomb. Sitting at Ghost's kitchen table at 11:30 that night, laptop glowing financial records spread across the screen in columns that told a story uglier than anything Maya had described. Ghost. You need to see this. Ghost crossed the room, looked at the screen, felt the cold in his chest turn to ice. Diane Mercer's salary at Parkside is $78,000 a year, Reaper said. Standard for a facility director at a city-contracted group home. Respectable. Nothing that would raise flags. But 3 years ago, she purchased a house for $340,000. Cash, no mortgage, no loan, no financing. 2 years ago, she leased a luxury sedan, $800 a month. Her daughter is enrolled at Westbridge Academy, $22,000 a year in tuition. Where's the money coming from? Ghost asked. Reaper pulled up the calculator on his screen. If she's placing children with unlicensed individuals for $800 cash per month, While the state continues to pay Parkside $4,800 per child, someone is pocketing $4,000 per kid per month. He typed the numbers. 7 kids that Maya knows about. Average placement of 10 months before someone ages out or questions get asked. That's $280,000. He looked up from the screen. She bought her house with money she made by selling children. The room went silent. The kind of silence that precedes storms. The kind that fills a space when 53 people simultaneously arrive at the same conclusion in the same rage and the same absolute unshakable determination to tear a corrupt system apart with their bare hands and rebuild it with something honest. Maya spoke from the couch. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. 7 kids I knew about. But I was only at Parkside for 12 months. The facility has been operating for 6 years. If she's been doing this from the beginning, the number isn't 7. It could be dozens. Ghost and Tank exchanged a look. The kind of look that passes between people who have seen the worst and have decided one more time to fight it anyway. Ghost's phone rang. Jennifer Brennan. Ghost, I've been thinking about what happened today. About how 4 people walked past my building while my daughter was climbing out a window. About how a homeless 14-year-old with duct tape on her shoes was the only person on the entire street who ran. Jennifer's voice was shaking, but not with fear, with something harder. I want to help, whatever you need. Money, lawyers, media contacts, testimony. I want to make sure that girl knows she changed my life today. She knows Ghost said, but I'll tell her again. He hung up, looked at Tank. Sophie's mother wants in. She has resources. At midnight, Carmen Hale arrived. Ghost's wife, 48 years old, former school counselor who had spent 22 years helping children navigate systems that didn't want to help them back before budget cuts eliminated her position, and the school district decided that children's mental health was a luxury it couldn't afford. She stood in the kitchen doorway, looked at her husband, looked at the vest missing from his shoulders, looked through the living room doorway at the sleeping girl on the couch, the one wearing the vest, the one whose face even in sleep carried the tension of someone who expected danger to arrive at any moment. Tell me, Carmen said. Ghost told her, all of it. The catch, the shoulder, the van, the 7 children, the money, the woman with the PhD and the governor's award who had built a career on the suffering of children she was paid to protect. Carmen listened without interrupting. When he finished, she walked to the living room, looked at Maya for a long time, then came back. She's ours, Carmen said. It wasn't a question. Ghost's eyes filled. The first tears he had allowed since Shaina's funeral. If she'll have us. She'll have us. Because that girl has been waiting her entire life for someone to choose her. And we are choosing her. Tonight, tomorrow, every day that comes after. She looked at her husband, the man who had carried an 8-year-old girl's death like a stone in his chest for 9 years. You found her, Carmen said quietly. She found us, Ghost corrected. She saved Sophie and we happened to be paying attention. All we did was stop. They sat in the kitchen listening to Maya breathe. The sound of a child sleeping without chemical sedation for the first time in months. And somewhere in the distance, the rumble of engines echoed through the empty streets as Iron Wolves chapters from neighboring states began converging, answering a call they didn't fully understand but trusted completely. Because that was what family meant. You didn't ask why. You showed up. At 2:17 in the morning, Ghost's phone rang again. Not Tank, not Reaper. The number was blocked. Mr. Hale. A woman's voice. Controlled, professional, smooth in the way that expensive things are smooth to polish, hiding something cold underneath. This is Director Diane Mercer of Parkside Youth Residential Center. I believe you have one of our residents. Ghost stepped into the hallway, pulled the bedroom door closed, kept his voice level. I don't know what you're talking about. Maya Lawson. 14 years old. She left our facility without authorization 2 weeks ago. She has a documented history of emotional disturbance, self-harm ideation, and delusional thinking. She fabricates stories about staff and conditions. She's a very troubled girl, Mr. Hale, and she needs to be returned to professional care immediately. Ghost's jaw tightened so hard he felt a molar crack. How did you get this number? Maya was observed on Anderson Street this afternoon. A concerned citizen recognized her from the missing persons alert we filed and noted the motorcycle club involvement. It wasn't difficult to identify who was involved. We've been very worried about Maya, Mr. Hale. 2 weeks on the street for a girl with her psychiatric profile is extremely dangerous. The way she said worried. The way she said psychiatric profile. The clinical precision of it. The practiced warmth layered over something calculated and cold. Ghost had heard that exact tone from commanding officers who explained why reports about abused children needed to be handled internally from bureaucrats, who explained why budgets were more important than bodies. Director Mercer Ghost said carefully, Maya is safe. She is receiving medical attention for injuries she sustained this afternoon. Beyond that, I don't have anything to discuss with you. Mr. Hale harboring a runaway minor is a criminal offense. I've already contacted the police. Officers will be at your residence within the hour. I strongly suggest you cooperate fully. Maya needs to be returned to a supervised clinical environment where she can receive the psychiatric care she clearly requires. The line went dead. Ghost stood in the hallway for 10 seconds. Processing. Then he moved. He woke Tank first. She was sleeping on the living room floor boots on phone in hand because Sarah Kowalski never slept deeply during an active operation. Mercer knows. She's called the police, says they're coming to collect Maya within the hour. Tank was on her feet in 2 seconds. How much does she know that Maya's with us? That the wolves are involved? She's framing it as runaway recovery, clinical language, psychiatric concerns, standard playbook for discrediting a child witness before they can testify. Tank's expression went granite hard. I'm calling Judge Patricia Martinez. Family court. Emergency custody. She owes me from the Riverside situation, and she's the only judge in this district who actually reads the files before making decisions. While Tank worked the phone, Ghost checked on Maya. She was awake. Eyes open in the dark. The girl who had learned to sleep with one ear tuned to danger had heard Mercer's name through the wall, and her body had gone from sleep to survival mode in less than a heartbeat. She knows, Maya said. Her voice was flat, resigned, the tone of someone who had expected this, who had always known that power reached further than the skate could carry you. She knows. Police are coming. Maya started to stand. I should go. If I'm not here, you won't be in trouble. I can disappear again. I'm good at it. 18 months of practice. Ghost knelt in front of her, put his hands on her shoulders, the good one and the broken one, gentle on both. You're not disappearing. Not tonight, not ever again. Tank is calling a judge right now. Emergency custody, legal, official. When those officers arrive, they're going to find a 14-year-old girl in the legal custody of responsible adults with a federal investigation pending against the woman who's trying to get her back. Maya's eyes searched his face, looking for the crack in the promise. She had been promised things before by people with degrees and authority and the institutional credibility to make promises sound permanent when they were actually disposable. You promised? Maya whispered. I promised. Then I'll stay. Tank appeared in the doorway. Judge Martinez will see us at 5. Expedited emergency custody hearing, but we need to survive the next 3 hours. At 2:51, 2 patrol cars pulled up outside Ghost Building. 4 officers. Standard response for a runaway minor with psychiatric flags in the system. Ghost met them at the front door. Calm, cooperative. His vest was upstairs on Maya's shoulders, but the bearing and the tattoos told the officers everything they needed to know about who they were dealing with. Officers. What can I do for you, sir? We received a call from Parkside Youth Residential Center regarding a missing minor, Maya Lawson, 14 years old. We have reason to believe she may be at this address. Ghost nodded. Maya is here. She's safe. She's receiving medical attention for a dislocated shoulder she sustained earlier today, saving a 4-year-old child from a fatal fall. I have a combat medic's documentation of her injuries and photographic evidence of systematic abuse at the facility she fled from. The lead officer was a sergeant with 20 years on the force, and the tired eyes of someone who had seen too many situations exactly like this one go wrong in exactly the same ways. Sir, the facility has filed a missing persons report. The minor is classified as a runaway with psychiatric concerns. Protocol requires us to return her to the facility or to Child Protective Services. I understand your protocol, Sergeant, but I need you to understand that returning this child to Parkside would be placing her in the custody of a woman who is currently under investigation by the FBI for child trafficking. Maya Lawson is a material witness in a federal case. Returning her would compromise that investigation and place her life at risk. The sergeant's eyes narrowed. That's a significant claim. Tank stepped out behind Ghost, held up her phone. Sergeant, I'm Sarah Kowalski, former NYPD detective SHIELD number 4729. I have FBI Special Agent Morrison on the line right now. She will confirm that Parkside Youth Residential Center is the subject of an active federal investigation and that Maya Lawson is a protected witness whose safety is a Bureau priority. Would you like to speak with her? The sergeant looked at Tank, looked at Ghost, looked at the 12 motorcycles reflecting blue and red light along the curb. He took the phone. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. When the sergeant handed it back, something had changed in his expression. The wariness remained, but it had been joined by relief. The relief of a man who had been given orders to return a child to a dangerous place and had just received legitimate grounds to refuse. We'll report the minor as located and in protective custody pending judicial review, the sergeant said. I need documentation by end of business tomorrow. You'll have it by 7 a.m., Tank said. The patrol cars pulled away at 3:12. Ghost watched their taillights disappear. Then he let out a breath he had been holding for 22 minutes. Upstairs, Maya was standing at the window. She had watched the entire exchange from above. Had watched Ghost and Tank place their bodies between her and a system that wanted to swallow her whole. had watched two people she had known for less than 12 hours risk criminal charges to keep a promise they had made to a girl with nothing to offer in return. They left, Maya said when Ghost came back. She sounded surprised, like she had expected the promise to break the way every promise in her life had broken. They left. Because of the FBI. Because of the truth. Sometimes the truth is enough if you've got people willing to stand behind it. Maya looked at him. At Carmen, who had appeared in the hallway in her bathrobe, who had been standing ready to physically block the apartment door if necessary. At Tank, already back on her phone building the legal architecture that would make Maya's safety permanent. At the vest on her shoulders. The weight of 200 promises. That was the night Maya Lawson stopped running. Not because she wasn't scared. She was terrified. But because she had learned something in the space between Sophie's fall and the sergeant's departure. Something that 18 months of invisibility had almost erased from her understanding of the world. There are people who stop. Not many, not enough. But they exist. And when they find you and they decide you matter, they don't let go. The rumble started at 5:47 in the morning. Low at first, like this distant thunder rolling in from the edge of the world. Then it grew, louder, closer, the sound of 200 engines converging on a single point in the gray pre-dawn light. The vibration traveled through concrete, and steel-rattled picture frames triggered car alarms the length of the block. Shook the windows of Ghost's apartment until the glass hummed. Maya jerked awake on the couch, stumbled to the window. The street below was filling with motorcycles, one after another. Montana plates, Wyoming plates, Colorado plates, Ohio plates, riders who had driven through the night on highways they knew by heart, engines cutting off in waves that left a silence heavier than the noise. They came, Maya whispered. Ghost appeared beside her with 2 cups of coffee. Held one out. I told you, when I make a promise, I keep it. Tank was already on the street, standing in the center of the formation like a field commander, which in every way that mattered she was. Her eyes were red-rimmed from no sleep but sharp, her jaw set in the way that people who knew her recognized as the precursor to their decisive action. She waited until every engine was silent, until 200 men and women were watching her. Most of you don't know why you're here yet. You came because Ghost called. Because I called. Because that's what family does. She paused. Yesterday, a 14-year-old girl named Maya Lawson saved a 4-year-old child's life. Caught the kid mid-fall from a 3rd-floor fire escape. Broke her own shoulder doing it. 4 adults walked past that building while Sophie Brennan was climbing out a window. Maya was the only person who ran. Where's the girl now? A voice from the crowd. Protected. Ghost has custody pending a hearing this morning. But here's what you need to know. Maya ran from Parkside Youth Residential Center 2 weeks ago, a city-contracted group home on Industrial Boulevard. And what she told us last night about that facility means we have work to do. Tank's expression hardened. Director Diane Mercer has been operating what we believe is a child trafficking operation disguised as a residential care facility. Maya told us about 7 children who were removed in the middle of the night in a white van and never seen again. Reaper's financial analysis shows Mercer is living well beyond her salary. The FBI is interested but needs corroborating evidence before they can move. That's where we come in. She looked across 200 faces. We are going door to door, every business, every residence within 6 blocks of Parkside. We are asking one question. Have you seen anything concerning about the youth center at 847 Emma Industrial Boulevard? We are not breaking laws. We are not threatening anyone. We are being the eyes and ears that should have been watching all along. Ghost descended the stairs with Maya beside him. She had insisted on coming down. Needed to see this with her own eyes. The crowd parted as they approached. 200 strangers looking at a skinny girl in an oversized jacket with her arm in a sling. This is Maya, Ghost said. She's the reason we're here. Maya looked at the faces staring back. Saw belief, saw fury on her behalf. Saw people ready to spend their day knocking on doors because a girl they had never met had told the truth and they had decided the truth mattered. Thank you, she said. Her voice was small but steady. Thank you for stopping. For listening. For believing me when I thought nobody ever would. Tank stepped beside her. You don't have to thank us. Just keep being brave a little longer. Can you do that? Maya touched Emma's photograph in her pocket. I can do that. The canvass began at 6:30. Teams of 3. One to knock and talk, one to document every word, one to witness. They spread out in concentric circles from Parkside, working every door within a 6-block radius with the systematic precision of people who understood that evidence was built one conversation at a time. By 8:15 they had their first witness. Rebecca Thornton lived at 839 Industrial Boulevard, 2 buildings down from Parkside. 68 years old, retired school teacher. Widow who had lived in the same apartment for 34 years. She answered the door in her bathrobe, saw the leather vests, and started to close it. The professor stopped her gently. Daniel Hayes, former high school counselor and social worker. 20 years in a system he'd eventually left because watching children fall through cracks he was forbidden to repair had cost him something he valued more than a pension. He had kind eyes and a voice that made frightened people feel safe enough to speak. "Ma'am, we're not here to cause any trouble. We're looking into concerns about the children's facility down the street. One of the kids from that facility saved a little girl's life yesterday. When we talked to her, she told us things that need investigating. We're hoping neighbors might have noticed something too." Rebecca hesitated, looked past Professor at the motorcycles filling the street, looked back at his face. "The van," she said. "I've seen the van." Professor waited, patient, still. The way good listeners wait, giving the witness space to find their own words and their own courage. White cargo van, Rebecca continued. Her hands were shaking now. "No windows in the back. I've seen it at Parkside 8-9 times over the past 2 years. Always late. 10-11 at night. It would pull up to the side entrance and a staff member would come out with a child. Sometimes the kid carried a duffel bag, sometimes nothing. They would get in the van would drive away, and I would never see that child again." "Did you report it?" Rebecca's face crumpled. The expression of someone who had carried guilt for years by telling themselves stories about confidentiality and qualified professionals and systems that work even when they obviously don't. "I asked once. Stopped a staff member at the grocery store. Asked where one of the girls went. Little girl with braids who used to play in the yard on Sunday afternoons. Staff member said she'd been transferred to a therapeutic placement. Better environment. Said families deserve privacy during transitions. Said it was confidential." Her voice broke. I told myself that was reasonable. That someone qualified was handling it. That pushing harder would be intrusive. How many children did I let disappear because I believed a comfortable lie instead of an uncomfortable truth? Professor wrote everything down. "You're speaking now, Mrs. Thornton." "That counts for something. Can I take your formal statement?" Rebecca nodded. "Of course. Whatever helps to find them." By 10:30 they had their second witness. Sandra Whitfield, 54, former Parkside cook. Fired in 2023 for what her termination letter called insubordination and failure to follow supervisory directives. Tank interviewed her personally at Sandra's kitchen table. The food budget was supposed to be $14 per child per day, Sandra said. She was gripping her coffee mug with both hands, knuckles white. That's what the state contract specified. 48 kids, $672 daily for food. I tracked every penny. Submitted receipts every Friday. 6 months in, Director Mercer called me to her office. Said we needed to optimize operational costs. The food budget was being reduced to $6 per child per day, effective immediately. I told her that wasn't enough. Showed her the nutritional requirements for growing children. Showed her what $6 could and couldn't buy. She looked at me with that smile the patient one and said, "Then you'll have to be creative, Sandra." Sandra's jaw tightened. I tried. Cheaper cuts of meat, more pasta, less fresh produce, watered the juice, cut portions. But kids were still hungry. I could see it in the way they ate too fast, hunched over their plates, protecting the food with their arms like someone might take it. The younger ones cried at night because their stomachs hurt. I started bringing food from home. My own money, my own groceries. Smuggling nutrition into a facility the state was paying $250,000 a month to properly feed 48 children. How long did that last? 3 months. Then I went back to Mercer. Brought meal logs. Brought records showing kids losing weight. Showed her a 12-year-old girl who had dropped 9 pounds in 8 weeks. She listened. Nodded. Said my concern was appreciated. Said the facility remained committed to the well-being of all residents. Then she said my job was to prepare meals within the allocated budget, and if I couldn't fulfill that responsibility, she would find someone who could. Tank leaned forward. What did you do? I filed a formal complaint with the city licensing board. Documented everything. Financial records, meal logs, weight data, photos of the portions we were serving. I sent it all certified mail with a return receipt. 2 weeks later, I was terminated. Insubordination. And my complaint was forwarded to the facility's internal review board. I called 3 times over the next 6 months. Same answer every time. The matter is being handled internally, Miss Whitfield. Thank you for your concern. Sandra opened a kitchen drawer. Pulled out a thick folder held together with rubber bands. I kept everything. Receipts, meal logs, budget memos, my complaint, the termination letter, carbon copies of every document I submitted. Because I knew this day would come. I just didn't know who would finally show up to collect it. Tank reached across the table and took the folder. Sandra, we're giving this directly to the FBI. By 12:45 they had their third witness, and this one changed everything. Frank Garrison, 71 years old, retired postal worker, 33 years delivering mail on Industrial Boulevard. He knew every building, every mailbox, every dog that barked when the truck pulled up. Bishop handled the interview. Marcus Hayes, former detective with instincts that years of retirement hadn't dulled. "I saw children in places they shouldn't have been," Frank said. He was sitting on his front porch, retired postal cap on his head like a badge he couldn't quite surrender. Late 2022, rural delivery route. "I pulled up to a house on Overland Avenue. Garage door was open, 3 children sleeping on blankets on the concrete floor. December. Maybe 30 degrees outside. No heat in that garage. Did you recognize them? No. But I'd been delivering to that address for 12 years. A man named Travis Polk. Never had kids, never had visitors who looked under 20. Then suddenly there are 3 children sleeping in his garage in winter. Did you report it?" Frank's expression hardened with the same guilt that had broken Rebecca Thornton's composure. "Told my supervisor. He said it wasn't our business. Deliver the mail, don't deliver opinions." Bishop's pen moved fast. "Did you deliver to Parkside every day for years?" Anything unusual about their mail, Frank thought for a moment. Outgoing mail increased significantly starting around 2022. Batch mailings, always the same return format. Parkside Administrative Office, official-looking envelopes going to addresses all over the state. Fabricated placement documents, Bishop said quietly, creating paper trails for children who had been moved outside the system. By 2 in the afternoon, Reaper had compiled 17 witness statements. By 4, his FBI contact confirmed a preliminary investigation warrant had been secured. The evidence was no longer one girl's testimony. It was a pattern documented by neighbors, former employees, and years of observation, a pattern that pointed in one direction. Maya sat in Ghost's apartment while the wolves worked. She couldn't participate in the canvas. Too recognizable, too vulnerable. If Mercer had eyes on the neighborhood and Ghost was certain she did, Maya needed to remain unseen for a few more hours. The irony cut deep. 18 months of being invisible against her will, and now she was choosing it as strategy. But she could hear everything. Every statement that came back to the apartment, every piece of evidence that confirmed what she had known in her gut for months. That she wasn't delusional, that Mercer's clinical language hadn't been therapy, that the system hadn't been functioning as designed. It had been functioning exactly as Mercer designed it. At 3:30, Carmen sat down beside her on the couch. Didn't speak, just sat, giving Maya the gift of someone who was present without demanding anything in return. "I keep thinking about them," Maya said finally. "The 7 kids who got in that van. I knew their names. Brittany, Marcus, Jessica, Timothy, Lily, David, Angela." She looked at Carmen. "I knew their names and I watched them go, and I told myself there was nothing I could do." "You were a child," Carmen said gently. "A child surviving conditions designed to break adults. Surviving is not the same as choosing silence." But the adults saw too. Rebecca saw the van for 2 years. Sandra tried to fight and got crushed. Frank saw kids in a garage in December. They all saw. And they all stopped pushing. Carmen was quiet for a moment. Because intervening requires believing that your discomfort matters less than someone else's survival. That's a hard calculation for most people. But look what's happening right now. Every one of those witnesses is speaking today because you spoke yesterday. You gave them permission to care. You showed them what courage looks like, and they're following your example. At 5:17, Tank called an emergency leadership meeting. Every team leader gathered in Ghost's living room. Reaper's FBI contact is ready to move, Tank said. But they need the final piece. They need to place Mercer personally at the center of the financial fraud. We've got witnesses for the van. For the food cuts for the missing kids. We need proof she personally profited. Reaper turned his laptop so everyone could see the spreadsheet on the screen. Mercer's salary is $78,000. House purchased 3 years ago for $340,000 cash. Luxury car lease at $800 a month. Daughter in private school at $22,000 a year. The math doesn't work on $78,000. It works on the $78,000 plus $4,000 per child per month skimmed from fraudulent placements. 7 kids, 10 months average, $280,000 minimum. And if there are more kids we don't know about, the number goes higher. She bought a house with money from selling children, Bishop said. His voice was flat. The voice of a former detective making a statement so monstrous that emotion would only diminish it. Tank stood. FBI raids tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Simultaneous warrants at Parkside Mercer's home and the administrative offices. Our job tonight is protection. When this breaks, Mercer will know who talked. And people facing federal trafficking charges with $300,000 in stolen money do unpredictable things. At 6:30, Maya asked the question that had been building since dawn. What if they don't find them? She was sitting at Ghost's kitchen table. Emma's photograph on one side. a list of 7 names written on a piece of paper on the other. What if those 7 kids are just gone? Ghost sat across from her. He didn't lie. Didn't offer false comfort. Then we make sure the world knows their names. Brittany, Marcus, Jessica, Timothy, Lily, David, Angela. We make sure people know they existed, that they mattered. But we're not there yet. We're not even close to giving up. At 9, Tank made one final call. Judge Patricia Martinez, the same judge who had granted the emergency custody hearing earlier that morning. Your Honor, the FBI moves on Parkside at 6 a.m. Mercer will be arrested. The facility will be shut down. 48 children are going to wake up to federal agents in case they need emergency placements, every one of them. I'm coordinating with Child Protective Services tonight, the judge said. Teams will be on site by 7. And Maya's custody confirmed. Emergency order is signed and filed. The Hale family has full temporary guardianship. Nobody is taking that girl. Tank hung up, looked at Ghost. She's yours. Ghost closed his eyes. Carmen took his hand. And for a moment in the wreckage of a 20-hour operation run from a 2-bedroom apartment, 2 people who had spent decades watching children fall through broken systems allowed themselves to believe that maybe this time the system might actually work. Maya didn't sleep. Sat at the kitchen table watching the clock count toward 6. Carmen sat with her. 2 women in the dark waiting for dawn to break everything open. At 5:47, Ghost's phone buzzed. Text from Reaper. Teams in position. Warrant signed. Go. Ghost showed Maya the screen. You ready? No. But that doesn't matter, does it? No, it doesn't. The emergency custody hearing at 5:55 that morning was procedural. Judge Martinez behind her desk. Maya between Ghost and Carmen, a court reporter documenting everything. Miss Lawson, the judge said I need to hear it from you. Do you want to live with Marcus and Carmen Hale? Maya's throat closed. In 18 months of being processed through a system that treated children like case numbers, no one had ever asked her that question. No one had ever cared what the answer was. Yes, I want to stay with them. Why? Because they asked me what I wanted. Because they stood in a doorway at 3 in the morning and told the police no. Because Mr. Ghost put his vest on my shoulders and meant it when he said I was safe. Because Carmen sat on the floor with me when I couldn't breathe and didn't try to fix me. She just stayed. Judge Martinez signed the order at 6:04. They walked out of chambers at 6:11. Maya carried a folder with an address written on it. 412 Riverside Avenue, home. Ghost's phone rang before they reached the car. Reaper. They're inside Parkside. Forensic team has Mercer's computer. Imaging the hard drive now. Morning staff arrived to federal agents in the lobby carrying filing cabinets out the front door. Mercer Team 2 is at her house. She answered the door making coffee. The arrest happened at 6:22. Diane Mercer stood in the kitchen of the house she had purchased with Children's Futures while 3 FBI agents presented the warrant. She studied it for a long time, then said in the same calm clinical voice she used for everything, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, ma'am. Wire fraud, theft of government funds, 12 counts of child endangerment, conspiracy to commit welfare fraud. They walked her out in handcuffs while neighbors watched from porches, coffee cups frozen halfway to their mouths, watching the woman with the PhD and the governor's award being placed in a federal vehicle at 6:30 on a Friday morning. But Mercer was not finished. She was arrested, but she was far from defeated. And within hours, her counterattack arrived from an unexpected direction. By noon, her attorney had filed motions challenging Maya's testimony. Emotionally disturbed minor, documented psychiatric history, pattern of fabrication, self-harm, ideation. Every clinical note Mercer had written about Maya was now being weaponized against her. Every diagnosis Mercer had assigned, every medication she had prescribed for a girl whose only illness was grief, was being presented to the court as evidence that Maya Lawson could not be trusted. And then came the television interview. Greg Hobson appeared on the local news at 1:15 in the afternoon. Former Parkside staff supervisor, clean-shaven, sympathetic. The kind of face that broadcasting technology transforms into trustworthiness. Maya Lawson is a troubled young woman, Hobson said into the camera, his voice calibrated to project concern and reluctance. We all cared about her very much at Parkside, but she has a documented history of emotional instability. She fabricates stories. She makes serious accusations against staff without basis. Director Mercer tried everything to help her. Therapy, medication, specialized interventions, but Maya's trauma from losing her family created a profound distrust of all authority figures. He paused, letting the pause do the work of suggesting something too compassionate to say directly. I worry that well-meaning people who don't understand her condition are being manipulated by a very convincing but very disturbed child. Maya watched the interview from Carmen's kitchen. Watched a man she had trusted. A man who had sometimes snuck her extra bread at dinner and whispered, keep your head down, things will get better. Sit on national television and systematically dismantle her credibility. The color drained from her face. He was nice to me. He gave me extra bread sometimes. He told me to hang in there. Ghost watched her expression shift from shock to something more dangerous than shock. Self-doubt. The most insidious weapon in the arsenal of institutional abusers. Not violence, not threats. The quiet, persistent erosion of a victim's trust in their own perception of reality. Am I making things up? Maya asked. Her voice was small, the voice of a 12-year-old standing outside a burning building watching smoke pour from the window of a room where her sister was dying. What if I am disturbed? What if I remember wrong? What if the van was just normal transfers and I turned it into something because I needed it to be something Ghost knelt in front of her? Hands on her shoulders. Maya, look at me. 17 witnesses confirmed what you described. 17 people with no connection to you who have never met. You described the same van, the same food cuts, the same missing children. Either you are the most elaborate fabricator in history, or you are telling the truth and someone on that television screen is lying to protect himself. Then why does hearing him say that make me feel like maybe he's right? Because that's what gaslighting does. It takes the thing you know and makes you doubt it. Makes you question your own experience. Makes you wonder if the pain was real or if you invented it because something is wrong with you. Ghost's voice was steady and hard. There is nothing wrong with you. The system that was supposed to protect you is broken. And the man on that television knows it. Because he was part of breaking it. Reaper confirmed it by evening. Greg Hobson's phone record showed 112 calls to Mercer's personal cell over 3 years. Text messages discussing logistics, schedules, payments. Hobson wasn't a sympathetic former employee defending his boss. He was an accomplice. He was the one who woke the children in the middle of the night. He was the one who walked them to the van. He was the one who told them they were going somewhere better while delivering them to strangers who would use them for labor or lock them in sheds or exploit them in ways that the word care had never been designed to describe. The FBI arrested Hobson at 9:47 that evening. He was at home watching his own interview on loop when agents knocked. He did not go quietly. By the next morning, the interview had been pulled from every network. Retracted. Flagged as the testimony of an accused co-conspirator in a federal child trafficking case. The narrative Mercer had tried to construct collapsed. But the damage had landed. For 12 hours, Maya had lived in the space between her truth and someone else's lie. Had wondered if her own mind could be trusted. Had felt the ground shift beneath the reality she had built her survival upon. Carmen found her at midnight on the bathroom floor. Not crying, just sitting, still, empty. He was nice to me, Maya said again. That's the part I can't get past. He gave me extra bread. And the whole time he was the one driving them away in the van. Sometimes the cruelty is in the kindness, Carmen said quietly. The extra bread kept you quiet, kept you trusting him. Made you think he was safe so that when he needed to discredit you, his word would carry weight against yours. That's not your failure. That's strategy. How do I trust anyone after this? You don't. Not with certainty. Trust is always a risk. But here's what I know. Ghost stood in a doorway at 3 in the morning because of you. Tank woke up a judge. Doc fixed your shoulder without asking for payment or filing a report. 200 people drove all night. And I'm sitting on this bathroom floor at midnight because I choose to be here. Not because it benefits me. Because you matter. She paused. Hobson gave you extra bread to keep you quiet. I'm sitting on this floor to make sure you're never quiet again. There's a difference. Can you see it, Maya? Could. Not completely, not all at once. But enough. Enough to stand up, enough to walk to her room, enough to pick up Emma's photograph and hold it and breathe. The forensic team found the spreadsheet on Mercer's laptop the next morning, hidden in a subfolder labeled Personal Photos 2019. Password protected, encrypted. The kind of file someone creates when they know they're doing something criminal and they're trying to hide the proof while keeping it accessible. The spreadsheet had 2 tabs. The first was labeled Current Residents, 48 names. The second was labeled Transfers. Not 7 rows as Maya had estimated from what she could see. 9. 9 children. 2 more than she had known about. Brandon Cole, age 12. Christina Hayes, age 11. Children Maya had never heard of taken during nights she had been locked in the reflection room or before she arrived. Each child had 4 columns. Placement date, monthly state payment received, monthly cash payment to placement. Status. State was paying $4,800 per month per child. Mercer was placing them for $800 cash, pocketing $4,000 per child per month. 9 kids, average 10 months, $360,000. 5 children were listed as located CPS intervention required. 4 were listed as unknown file closed. Unknown file closed. That meant Mercer had lost track of them. The people she had placed them with had moved or disappeared, and instead of reporting 4 children missing, she had closed their files, erased them from the system, let them vanish. The FBI moved fast. They found Brittany Walsh first, 15 now, living in a trailer park 120 miles from the city with a woman collecting $800 a month to house her. Brittany had no bed, slept on a sagging couch, hadn't been in school for 8 months, spent her days cleaning, doing laundry, minding the woman's biological children. When agents knocked, Brittany answered the door, saw the badges, started crying before anyone spoke. "Are you taking me back to Parkside, Num? We're taking you somewhere safe, somewhere real." Brittany grabbed a backpack from behind the couch. Everything she owned in the world. "Is Maya okay?" Maya Lawson. She was at Parkside with me. Director Mercer said she ran away, said she was disturbed, said she'd probably hurt herself. "Is she alive?" "Maya's alive. She's safe. She's the reason we found you. She told us your name." Brittany's legs gave out. An agent caught her. She remembered me. She remembered all of you. They found Marcus Williams and Jessica Reed by midday, both at the same address, a rundown house in the industrial district. A man named Raymond Webb claiming to be their uncle. Records showed no relation, but he had been collecting $1,600 a month for 14 months. Marcus was 12. Jessica was 9. Both underweight, both bruised in patterns that spoke of discipline administered with hands and belts and whatever was nearest. Both flinched when Webb moved too quickly. Jessica asked the same question. "Is Maya okay?" They found Timothy Ross at an unlicensed auto repair shop, 13 years old, sleeping on a cot in the back office, working 12-hour days changing tires and draining oil instead of sitting in a classroom. He hadn't seen a doctor in over a year, but he had a journal. Spiral notebook with a cracked cover. He had written in it whenever he could, documenting everything, because if I disappear completely, someone needs to know what happened. In the journal, Timothy had written about another boy. Brandon was here before me. Said he'd been moved 3 times. Said the last place was a farm upstate. He ran, but they caught him, brought him back. Then one day he was gone. Owner said he got adopted, but his jacket was still here. His backpack. Nobody who gets adopted leaves their stuff. They found Lily Brooks at an overcrowded house, placed there as a live-in babysitter for 4 children under age 5. She was 10. Got 2 hours of sleep a night. When agents told her she was being removed, she started shaking. "Where's Maya?" "Is she alive?" Director Mercer told us Maya was dead. Said she jumped off a bridge because she was crazy. 5 children found. 5 children who had been invisible for months. 5 who asked about Maya before they asked about themselves. Timothy's journal led them to the farm, 200 miles north. Property owned by Harold and Diane Peters. Brandon Cole was in the barn. 13 now. Hadn't attended school in a year. Working 12-hour days in exchange for room and board. The Peters claimed they had adopted him through a private agency. Had no paperwork. 6 found. David Foster's trail led to Nevada, to an address registered to his own uncle, Michael Foster, the man who had paid Mercer $2,000 to make his nephew disappear. David was locked in a shed behind the house. 15 years old, hadn't seen daylight in weeks. His uncle had been keeping him prisoner, using him for labor, threatening to kill him if he ran. The first thing David said when the agent opened the shed door and light poured in, "I didn't think anyone was looking for me." 7 found. Angela Parrish found them. A text message to Maya's new phone at 9:30 in the evening. "Maya, it's Angela. I saw the news. I'm alive. I've been at my older sister's apartment. She's 19, not approved for foster care. But she took me when I ran from the last place. Please tell them I'm okay. Tell them my sister is my family." 8 found. Christina Hayes was the last. Her call came at 4:30 in the morning, 2 days after the raid. A stolen phone. A voice so small Maya pressed the phone hard against her ear to hear it. "Maya. Is this Maya? Someone posted your number online. Said you were finding the missing kids. I need help. I don't know exactly where I am. The woman who took me locks the doors at night, takes our phones. There are 4 other kids here. None of us are supposed to exist. Christina. I'm here. Stay on the line. Tell me anything you can see." A sign across the street, blue. Wilson Creek Community Church. Maya was already running down the hall to Ghost's room. 14 minutes. 3 FBI units. The door breached at 4:47. Christina Hayes and 4 other children found locked in bedrooms on the 2nd floor. A woman named Patricia Moore running an unlicensed group home funded by cash from Mercer's network. Christina was 11. Is Maya really okay? Director Mercer told us she was dead. 9 children found. All alive, all damaged, all asking about the invisible girl who had refused to forget their names. And 4 more children in that house who hadn't been on anyone's list. 4 children no one had been looking for. Maya sat at Carmen's kitchen table at 5:30 in the morning. Ghost made coffee nobody would drink. Carmen gripped the counter like it was the only solid thing left in the world. 9 names, all found. "They're safe because of you," Ghost said. Maya looked at Emma's photograph, at the list of names, At the morning light filling a kitchen that belonged to the people who had chosen her, Emma would have been proud. Carmen knelt beside her chair, put her arms around her, careful of the shoulder. Emma is proud. And so are we. Diane Mercer was formally arraigned that morning. The charges filled 3 pages. Wire fraud, theft of government funds, 12 counts of child endangerment, conspiracy to commit welfare fraud, child trafficking, kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, filing false government documents. The woman who had won awards for excellence in child welfare stood in a gray prison jumpsuit while a federal prosecutor read each count into the record. Bail was set at $750,000. She couldn't make it. The house was frozen, the account seized, the luxury sedan impounded. Greg Hobson was arraigned the same afternoon. Conspiracy, aiding and abetting child trafficking. His television interview was entered into evidence as proof of ongoing obstruction. The face that had broadcast trustworthiness to millions of viewers was now being photographed for a federal booking file. The preparation for the city council hearing took 3 days. 3 days of Maya sitting with Carmen and a lawyer named Patricia Morgan, who specialized in child advocacy and had been doing this work for 30 years. They sat at Carmen's kitchen table, Patricia across from Maya, Ghost in the doorway. They're going to ask hard questions, Patricia said. The council wants to understand how a city-contracted facility operated a trafficking ring for years without anyone catching it. They need specifics, dates, times, names, details that prove this was systematic, not isolated. What if I forget something? What if I say it wrong? Then you say you forgot. Then you correct yourself, then you keep talking. The truth doesn't need to be perfectly organized, it just needs to be true. I don't trust adults. The words came out flat rehearsed, the product of 18 months of verification. Adults at Parkside saw what was happening and chose silence. Adults walked past me on the street for 2 weeks. Greg Hobson gave me extra bread and then called me crazy on national television. Why should I trust that these council members will be any different? Patricia didn't flinch. Because 200 motorcycle club members will be sitting in the gallery making sure they treat you with respect. Because Ghost and Carmen will be right behind you. Because 9 children are alive because you trusted Ghost when every instinct told you to run. Sometimes trust is a bet you make against the evidence. Can you make that bet one more time? Maya touched Emma's photograph. For Emma. For the 9. That's enough. The night before the hearing, Maya couldn't sleep. Sat in her room at 2 in the morning counting the ways this could fall apart. Ghost knocked at 2:17. Can't sleep either. How did you know I was awake? Because I was awake the night before my discharge hearing. Because Carmen was awake before she defended her counseling program to the school board. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you walk into the room anyway. He sat on the floor beside her bed. What scared you most when you testified that nobody would care? That I'd tell the truth about Shaina and they'd nod and make sympathetic faces and then go back to protecting each other. Is that what happened? Yeah. They discharged me. Buried it. Shaina's stepfather got reassigned. Ghost was quiet. But I could look at myself in the mirror. I could stand in front of my own reflection and know I'd said the real thing when it mattered. That's worth more than a career? Is it worth losing everything? It's worth more than keeping everything and staying quiet. Because the alternative is becoming Diane Mercer. Comfortable and credentialed and surrounded by children who are suffering because you chose your comfort over their survival. The city council chambers filled fast. By 8:30, 200 motorcycles were parked outside in formation. Tank had called every chapter, told them this was about visibility, being seen, filling the gallery so that every council member who looked up from the witness table would see 200 people who had driven through the night because one girl's truth mattered enough. Media filled the back rows. Social workers, advocates, parents, and in the front sitting silently the 53 Iron Wolves who had been there from the first hour. Maya walked in at 9:47, flanked by Ghost and Carmen, wearing clothes that fit, jeans, a sweater Carmen had bought, shoes without duct tape, her arms still in the sling, but she was standing. The council president, Margaret Torres, called the session to order. Our first witness is Maya Lawson, 14 years old, former resident of Parkside Youth Residential Center. Maya sat at the witness table. The microphone looked enormous. Miss Lawson Torres said, her voice kind. Thank you for being here. Take whatever time you need. Maya took a breath that went all the way down to the place where she kept Emma's memory. My parents died 18 months ago. Apartment fire, my mother, my father, and my little sister Emma. She was 5. I tried to save her. The firefighters pulled me back, said the building was collapsing. Emma died while I was standing on the sidewalk watching smoke come out of her window. The chamber went airless. I was placed at Parkside 3 days after the funeral. I was 12. I didn't understand what was happening. I just knew everyone I loved was dead. and people with clipboards were sending me somewhere they called a residential facility. She told them about the room, the window painted shut, the meals that shrank, the cook who got fired for caring. She told them about the reflection room. 14 hours locked in concrete for asking about her grandmother. She told them about Diane Mercer. The smile, the vocabulary that turned cruelty into clinical language. The way she could stand in front of inspectors and project competence while children sat in locked rooms down the hall going hungry. She told them about the van. 7 children. Middle of the night. Gone. She told them about Greg Hobson, the extra bread, the television interview, the 12 hours of doubting her own sanity because a man who had shown her small kindnesses had used those kindnesses to call her delusional. A council member named David Richardson spoke. Miss Lawson, you mentioned you escaped, how I climbed through a bathroom window. I'd been locked inside for refusing medication I didn't need. Director Mercer prescribed antipsychotics for what she called attachment disorder. I told her I wasn't sick, I was grieving. She said grief that interferes with daily functioning is a psychiatric condition. Maya held up her left palm, white scars crossing her skin. The window had razor wire on the outside. Old, rusty. I was 12 years old climbing through razor wire at midnight because staying inside was more dangerous than bleeding. Torres leaned forward. What do you want from us, Miss Lawson? Maya looked at 7 faces. I want monthly inspections where someone actually talks to the children. Not the directors. The children. I want anonymous reporting so staff can speak up without being fired like Sandra Whitfield was. I want court approval for every transfer. I want tracking on every vehicle that moves a child. I want criminal penalties for anyone who runs a facility the way Parkside was run. She paused. And I want Director Mercer to spend every day of her sentence knowing that 9 children survived because she underestimated one invisible girl with duct tape on her shoes. The vote happened 2 hours later. Unanimous, 7 yes, 0 opposition, Maya's law, written into the legal code of a city that had ignored her for 18 months. The federal trial began 6 weeks later. United States versus Diane Mercer. Federal courthouse. Jury of 12. Maya testified on day 3. The defense attorney, Robert Sterling, was expensive and polished. The kind of lawyer who could make a jury doubt their own names. Miss Lawson, isn't it true that your Parkside file documents oppositional behavior? My file was written by Director Mercer, the defendant, the woman on trial for trafficking children. You're asking me if her assessment of my behavior is accurate. That's like asking a thief if the locks were really locked. Sterling shifted. You ran away from the facility. That's a violation of residential guidelines. So is locking children in concrete rooms without food or water for 14 hours. So is cutting the food budget until kids lose weight they can't afford to lose. So is loading children into a van at midnight and selling them to strangers. Which violations concern you more, Mr. Sterling? He had no answer. Tried 3 more angles. Each time Maya met him with quiet, devastating clarity. The prosecution called every rescued child. One by one they took the stand. Brittany testified about sleeping on a couch for 8 months. Marcus testified about being hit when he didn't work fast enough. Timothy read from the journal he had kept. The one that said, if I disappear completely, someone needs to know. Christina testified about stealing a phone at 4:30 in the morning because Maya was the only person who had remembered her name. David Foster testified last. The boy who had been locked in a shed, whose uncle had paid to make him vanish. His voice was quiet, but his words carried through the silent courtroom. I stopped believing anyone was looking for me. Stopped believing I was a person worth looking for. Director Mercer told my uncle I was a problem that could disappear. And for a while I did disappear. Into a shed. Into the dark. And I thought that was my entire life now. He looked at Maya. Then someone remembered I existed. Someone said my name and people came looking. You hear about miracles. I never believed in them. Until a 14-year-old girl I barely knew decided my name was worth remembering. Then came the moment no one saw coming. During closing arguments, Mercer's attorney made an unusual request. He asked that his client be permitted to address the court. Judge Patricia Martinez studied the request, then allowed it. Diane Mercer stood, turned to face the courtroom. Her eyes found Maya in the gallery seated between Ghost and Carmen. Something crossed Mercer's face. Not remorse, something colder, sharper. The expression of someone who has lost everything and has decided to detonate whatever remains. Miss Lawson, Mercer said. Her voice was calm, professional to the end. I want you to know something about your sister, about Emma, about the fire. Maya's blood turned to ice. The investigation into that fire was closed as accidental, faulty wiring. But I've worked in child welfare for 20 years. I have contacts in the fire marshal's office. And what I know is that the investigation was incomplete. Evidence was overlooked, questions went unasked. Your sister's death may not have been the accident everyone told you it was. The courtroom erupted. Judge Martinez hammered the gavel. The prosecution objected. Ghost's hand closed around Maya's arm. Carmen's body went rigid. Mercer watched Maya's face. Watched the color drain away. Watched the girl who had brought down her empire begin to tremble. This was her last weapon. Not legal defense, not evidence, psychological demolition. If she couldn't win the verdict, she would shatter the witness. Would take Maya's deepest wound and twist the knife in front of 12 jurors in the entire gallery. Maya couldn't breathe. The courtroom walls pressed inward. Emma. The fire, not an accident, the smoke, the screaming, her sister's voice calling her name through flames, the firefighters dragging her backward while Emma's voice got smaller and smaller and then stopped. Ghost leaned close. She's lying. This is what people like her do when they've lost everything. They throw grenades to burn everyone around them. But Maya wasn't hearing him. She was hearing Emma. Hearing 18 months of guilt compressed into one poisonous sentence. Your sister's death may not have been an accident. Reaper was already on his phone, texting FBI contacts within 4 minutes confirmation. The fire investigation had been thorough, conclusive. Faulty electrical wiring and original building infrastructure. No evidence of foul play, no suppressed findings. The report was public record and independently verified. Mercer had lied, had manufactured doubt from nothing, had used a dead 5-year-old girl as a weapon against the sister who survived. Ghost passed Reaper's phone to the prosecutor. The prosecutor requested a sidebar, showed Judge Martinez the verified fire report. The judge recalled the jury and issued an instruction. The defendant's statement regarding the death of Emma Lawson is entirely without factual basis. The fire investigation has been independently verified. The jury will disregard the statement in its entirety and may consider it evidence of the defendant's willingness to manipulate and cause harm. 12 jurors looked at Mercer. 12 people who had just watched a woman try to weaponize a child's dead sister in open court. Whatever sympathy Sterling had built over 3 weeks of careful defense evaporated. They saw her now. Not the PhD, not the awards, not the clinical vocabulary. They saw the woman who sold children and smiled about it, who locked them in concrete rooms and called it therapy, who, when she had nothing left, tried to destroy a 14-year-old girl by lying about her sister's death. The jury deliberated 4 hours, returned at 3:47 on a Friday. Wire fraud, guilty. Theft of government funds, guilty. All 12 counts of child endangerment, guilty. Child trafficking, guilty. Kidnapping, guilty. Unlawful imprisonment, guilty. Filing false documents, guilty. Mercer's face went white. Her attorney requested bail pending sentencing, denied. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Martinez delivered it. Miss Mercer, you held a position of extraordinary trust, credentials, awards, the governor's commendation. And you used every piece of that credibility to exploit the most vulnerable population in our society. You took children who had already lost everything and treated them as inventory, as revenue, as problems to be managed, and disappeared. Mercer tried to speak. You never meant to get caught. That's what you never meant. The judge's voice could have frozen steel. 9 children almost died because of your choices. And when a 14-year-old girl had the courage to speak, you tried to destroy her. You sent your accomplice onto television to call her crazy. You used your clinical authority to paint a grieving child as mentally ill. And in this courtroom, in your final act, you used her dead sister as a weapon. 18 years. Federal prison. No parole eligibility for 12 years. Diane Mercer was led away in handcuffs. Did not look back. Did not apologize. Just walked out of the courtroom and into the system she had profited from on the receiving end of locked doors and institutional control for the first time in her life. Maya sat between Ghost and Carmen. Watched the woman who had tried to erase her being swallowed by the machine. It should have felt like victory, like closure. Instead, it felt like a door opening onto something harder than testimony in courtrooms. The work of learning to live in the world as a visible person. The work of believing she deserved to be seen. The work of rebuilding a life from the wreckage of 18 months of systematic destruction. Ghost's hand found hers, squeezed once. You did it. We did it, Maya said. Because she had learned that being seen required people willing to look. That survival was a collective act, that no one saves themselves alone. The weeks after the trial were the hardest Maya had ever faced. Harder than Parkside. Harder than the streets. Because surviving was one thing, a skill she had mastered through repetition and desperation. Living was something else entirely. Living required trust, required openness, required the terrifying vulnerability of letting people close enough to help, knowing that closeness was also close enough to hurt. She woke at 4 in the morning expecting concrete walls and the red eye of a surveillance camera blinking in the corner. Woke reaching for Emma's photograph to verify she still existed, that she hadn't been erased overnight by someone with a clipboard and the authority to make children vanish. Woke panicking because the bedroom door was open, and openness meant vulnerability, and vulnerability was something Parkside had taught her to treat as a fatal weakness. Carmen found her on the floor the fourth night, back pressed against the wall, knees pulled to her chest, hyperventilating. The position of a child who has learned that the safest place in any room is the corner farthest from the door. I can't do this. Maya gasped. I can't sleep in a room with an open door. I can't eat 3 meals without waiting for someone to take the food away. I can't stop listening for footsteps. I can't be a normal person. I don't know how. Carmen sat on the floor beside her, close enough to touch but not touching, present without crowding. The practiced distance of a woman who had spent 22 years counseling children and understood that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply be in the room. Nobody's asking you to be normal, Carmen said. We're asking you to be here. That's all. Just be here. Let the rest come when it's ready. They sat on the floor together for an hour. Maya's breathing gradually slowed. The panic receded like a tide, leaving behind the exhaustion that always followed. Leaving behind the raw, scraped-out emptiness of someone who has used up every reserve of strength and has nothing left except the willingness to try again tomorrow. Therapy with Dr. Lynn Prescott began the second week. Small office in a building that looked nothing like an institution. Comfortable chairs. A window that opened. Plants on the windowsill. Details that shouldn't have mattered but did. Because every detail that differed from Parkside was a reminder that this was not that place. Tell me about Emma, Dr. Prescott said during the third session. Maya's jaw locked. I don't want to talk about Emma. Why not? Because talking about her makes her real. Makes her death real. As long as I don't say it out loud, some part of me can pretend she's still somewhere. Still 5 years old with pigtails and yellow ribbons and that smile. Still waiting for me to come back for her. Dr. Prescott leaned forward slightly. Or you can look at it differently. As long as you don't talk about her, she stays frozen in the moment of her death. Stays trapped in the smoke and the fire. Talking about her lets her be the girl she was before that night. Lets her be the sister who laughed and played and then tied yellow ribbons in her hair. Maya stared at the carpet. You were 12 years old in a burning building, Dr. Prescott continued. The firefighters who pulled you back saved your life, Ethel. Emma's death was caused by faulty wiring and smoke and structural failure. Not by a 12-year-old girl standing on a sidewalk. Then why does it feel like it was my fault? Because blame gives you control. If Emma died because you failed, then you had the power to save her. If Emma died because of a random electrical failure, you had no power at all. And you've been powerless for 18 months, Maya. Every decision taken from you, every choice made by someone else. So you chose the one thing you could control, blame. Because blame made you powerful even if the power was made of pain. She paused. But blame keeps Emma in the fire. Grief lets her out of it. Grief lets you remember the pigtails and the ribbons and the gap-toothed smile instead of the smoke. Grief lets her rest. Maya cried for 40 minutes. Not the controlled, rationed tears of someone who has learned that emotion is dangerous. The deep, unguarded, full-body sobbing of someone who finally feels safe enough to fall apart. 18 months of compressed grief releasing in waves that left her exhausted and hollowed out and for the first time just slightly lighter. As if something that had been pressing on her chest since the night of the fire had shifted just enough to let a little more air in. I don't want to let her go, Maya said when the crying finally subsided to hiccups and ragged breathing. You don't have to let her go. You just have to carry her differently. Not as guilt. As love. As the reason you ran towards Sophie. Emma doesn't need you to suffer. She needs you to live. Can you try that? I can try. School started 4 weeks after the trial. Lincoln Middle School, 8th grade. The hallways were loud and bright and full of teenagers who lived in a world Maya barely recognized, a world where the biggest problems were homework deadlines and social hierarchies and whether the lunch menu had anything worth eating. A world where windows opened and doors weren't locked and adults asked how your day was and actually waited for the answer. The girl in homeroom whispered loud enough for Maya to hear. That's her. The one from the news. The facility girl. Maya's hands started shaking. She sat in the back row, head down, counting seconds until the bell would release her. At lunch, she sat alone at a table in the corner, eating mechanically, not tasting anything, just putting food into her body, because Carmen had asked her to try eating 3 meals a day, and she had promised to try. Then someone sat across from her. A boy, maybe 15, dark hair, quiet eyes, the kind of stillness that comes from having survived something that taught you the value of calm. You're Maya, right? I'm Daniel Oakes. I was at Riverside Children's Home before they shut it down last year. Different building. Same kind of nightmare. I just wanted to say that what you did took more guts than most adults possess in their entire lives. Maya looked up from her untouched sandwich. They shut down Riverside. After your testimony went public, the city investigated every contracted facility in the system. Found violations at 12 of them. Riverside, Mountain View, Harbor House, all closed. 200 kids placed in better situations as because you stood in front of a microphone and told the truth. Maya blinked. I didn't know that. Most people don't follow what happens after the news cycle moves on. But those 200 kids know. We all know. Daniel stood. Anyway, you're not alone here. Just wanted you to tell you that. He walked away before Maya could respond, but something in her chest loosened. The recognition of a shared language. The comfort of knowing that someone in this building understood why windows that open are a luxury and why a table with food on it can make you cry. 8 weeks after the trial, Tank organized a gathering at the Iron Wolves clubhouse. Not a party, a reunion. 9 children who had been found because Maya had refused to forget their names. Brittany Walsh arrived first, 15 now, living with a verified foster family who had been screened by multiple agencies, enrolled in school, gaining weight, learning to sleep through the night without checking the locks. She saw Maya and covered her mouth with both hands, tears streaming before she could form a single word. You remembered me, Brittany managed. You knew my name, you said my name and they came. Of course I knew your name. How could I forget it? Marcus Williams came next, then Timothy Ross, Jessica Reed, Lily Brooks, David Foster, Angela Parrish, Brandon Cole, Christina Hayes. One by one they arrived, and one by one they wrapped their arms around Maya as if she were the only solid ground in a world that had been nothing but quicksand beneath their feet for as long as they could remember. Christina held on longest. The girl who had called at 4:30 in the morning from a phone she had stolen while her captor slept. You answered? Christina said into Maya's shoulder. I called in the middle of the night and you answered. Nobody answers when I call for help. Nobody ever answers. I'll always answer, Maya said. Always. They spent 3 hours together, sharing stories that weren't suitable for polite company but were exactly suitable for a room full of people who had lived through the same unsuitable situations, comparing scars, laughing about things that weren't funny but hurt less when laughter was the alternative to breaking. Timothy showed them his journal, the spiral notebook that had led agents to Brandon. Brandon showed them the calluses on his hands from the farm, thick and yellow, the hands of a 13-year-old boy who had done the work of an adult. David sat in the corner, quiet, watchful, but present. He was learning slowly that rooms could be safe, that closed doors could open, that adults in leather vests could be trusted as readily as adults in white coats could not. Angela had brought her sister. The 19-year-old who had taken her in without legal authority or financial support, who had fed her with money she didn't have and protected her with a ferocity that no credential could match. The sister whose apartment was too small and whose age was too young and whose love was the only thing that had kept Angela alive. The FBI had worked with social services to make the arrangement legal. The sister was now Angela's official guardian. A family, it turned out, was not always where the system placed you. Sometimes family was where you ran to when the system failed. And somewhere in the middle of that afternoon, surrounded by 9 people who knew exactly what she had survived because they had survived it alongside her, Maya realized that something had changed inside her. Not all at once, not dramatically, not in the way that movies depict transformation with swelling music and golden light. More like a door opening 1 inch wider. A window unsealing after years of being painted shut. A small quiet shift in the architecture of who she understood herself to be. She was not invisible. She was not a case number. She was not a file that could be closed and marked unknown. She was a girl who had caught a falling child and broken herself doing it. A girl who had spoken when silence would have been safer. A girl who had carried 9 names in her memory like prayers and refused to stop saying them until someone listened. She was Maya, and she was seen, but being seen meant feeling everything. The good and the terrible, the hope and the horror, and 3 months after the trial the horror caught up with her. The panic attacks returned. The sleeplessness intensified. Her appetite vanished. One particularly bad episode in the middle of English class sent her to the nurse's office, curled on the couch, hyperventilating, convinced she was dying, convinced the walls were concrete, and the camera was watching, and the door was locked and no one was coming. Ghost came to pick her up. Found her shaking. I thought I was past this. I thought the trial would fix it. I thought finding the kids would fix it. But it keeps coming back, like it's living inside me, and it doesn't care that things are better now. Ghost sat beside her on the nurse's couch. Healing doesn't work like that. It doesn't have a finish line you cross and then you're done. It doesn't care about timelines or milestones. Some days you're standing tall, some days you're on this couch. Both days count. Both days are part of the same process. What if I'm not strong enough? You caught a 4-year-old falling from 3 stories. You testified before city council. You stared down a federal defense attorney. You watched Mercer try to use Emma against you in open court, and you didn't break. He looked at her. You are strong enough, but you don't have to be strong every single day. Some days you can be 14 and scared and exhausted and done. That's allowed. That's normal. That's what being a kid is supposed to feel like sometimes. Maya started crying. Not the controlled, efficient tears of someone managing their emotions. The deep, messy, uncontrolled sobbing of someone who finally had permission to fall apart without consequences. Ghost held her. Let her be weak. Let her be young. Let her be exactly what the system had never allowed her to be. A child. 4 months after the trial, Jennifer Brennan invited Maya to Sophie's 5th birthday party. Maya almost didn't go, almost convinced herself that Sophie was too young to remember, almost chose the safety of invisibility over the risk of showing up. Carmen said, "Go. Let that little girl see you're real. Let her tell you what you mean to her. You need to hear it." Sophie opened the front door wearing a princess costume and a tiara made of glitter and pipe cleaners. When she saw Maya, she screamed her name with a volume and enthusiasm that rattled the window panes. Threw herself at Maya's legs and held on with the grip strength of a child who has been told that this person saved her life and has decided that letting go is not an option. "I drew you a picture," Sophie announced. She dragged Maya into the house past balloons and streamers and a cake shaped like a castle to the refrigerator where a crayon drawing was taped at Sophie height. 2 stick figures, one large, one small. The large one had a red mark on its shoulder. The small one had a smile so wide it extended past the edges of the face. "That's you catching me," Sophie explained with the certainty of a 5-year-old who has never questioned whether her interpretation of events is correct. "Mommy says you're my guardian angel." "What's a guardian angel?" Maya knelt so they were the same height. The gesture she had learned from Ghost. The posture that means I see you and you matter and I am making myself small so that you feel large. Someone who watches over you, who makes sure you're safe. "Are you going to watch over me forever?" "Forever." And she meant it. In the way that only someone who understands what it costs when no one is watching can mean a promise to never stop. Jennifer pulled her aside while Sophie methodically destroyed her birthday cake. After the trial, Jennifer said, "I started volunteering. Foster care advocacy, family court observation. I go twice a week. I sit in the gallery during custody hearings and make sure the judges see the children in front of them, not just the paperwork." She looked at Maya with eyes that held 18 months of gratitude and the fierce converted energy of someone whose life had been redirected by a single moment on a sidewalk. "You didn't just save Sophie that day. You saved me from being one of the people who walks past for the rest of my life. From being the kind of person who sees a child falling and assumes someone else will catch her. You changed what I see when I look at the world. And I can't undo that. I don't want to undo it. So thank you." Maya didn't know how to hold something that large. The idea that her desperate, instinctive sprint toward a falling stranger had sent ripples outward into lives she would never trace, changing trajectories she would never see. "Thank you for believing me," Maya said. 4 adults walked past that building. "You were the first one who listened." "I should have listened sooner," Jennifer said. "You listened. That's enough." 6 months after the trial, the adoption became final. Maya Lawson became Maya Hale. Permanent, legal, real, not temporary placement, not emergency custody, not a file on a judge's desk waiting for review. A family, chosen, official, hers. Judge Patricia Martinez presided. The same judge who had said to sign the emergency custody order at 5 in the morning. Who had watched the FBI raid unfold from her chambers. Who had sentenced Diane Mercer to 18 years. Who had seen Maya walk through her courtroom as a terrified witness and was now watching her return as a daughter. Miss Hale, the judge said. And the new name in the judge's mouth sounded like something that had always been true and was only now being acknowledged. "I've been on this bench for 23 years, thousands of cases. I have seen courage in many forms, but I have never in 23 years seen anyone fight as hard as you have fought. You saved 9 children. You changed the law of this city. You made invisible children visible. And now you're choosing a family. After everything you've endured, after every reason the world has given you to distrust permanence, you are choosing to believe that this is real. That takes more courage than anything else you've done." Ghost and Carmen signed the papers. Ghost's hand shook when he picked up the pen. Carmen's did not. She signed with the steady hand of a woman who had decided 6 months ago, standing in a kitchen doorway, looking at a sleeping girl in a borrowed vest, that this child was hers. The paperwork was just the world catching up to what Carmen had already known. Tank organized a gathering at the clubhouse. 200 motorcycles. A college fund that the chapters had built together over 6 months, $127,000 in a scholarship account with Maya's name on it. Proof that being seen could also mean being invested in. That visibility came with support, not just exposure. Someone called for a speech. Maya stood on a chair so everyone in the crowded clubhouse could see her face. Her hands were shaking. Public speaking still terrified her. But Ghost squeezed her shoulder once. Carmen nodded. And Sophie, who had insisted on attending and was currently covered in cake frosting from a slice Tank had given her, yelled from Jennifer's arms. "You can do it, Maya." Maya looked at 200 faces. Leather vests and silver patches and eyes that held belief and fury and something she had learned to recognize as love, though it had taken her months to call it that. 18 months ago I was invisible. Sleeping on subway trains, eating from dumpsters behind restaurants, running from a system that had decided I was a problem to be managed instead of a person to be helped. 4 adults walked past the building where Sophie was falling. 4 people who saw a child in danger and decided it wasn't their responsibility. You were the 5th group. You stopped. She looked at Ghost, at Carmen, at Tank, at Reaper and Doc and Bishop and Professor, at the faces she had memorized because they had memorized hers. I've learned something since then. Something it took breaking my shoulder and testifying in front of city council and watching Diane Mercer try to destroy me in a federal courtroom to understand. Being invisible isn't safe. It's erasure. And being seen, really seen, means people can hurt you. Means people can lie about you on television. Means people can try to use your dead sister as a weapon in open court. But it also means people can save you. And you saved me. In saving me, you saved 9 other children. You changed laws, you shut down 12 facilities, you made it harder for anyone to do what Mercer did ever again. Her voice got stronger, steadier. The voice of someone who had found her footing on ground that had been shaking for 18 months and had finally gone still. So here's what I want to say to everyone hearing this story. Everyone who will ever hear about the girl who caught a falling child and broke herself doing it. Pay attention, look around you, see the invisible people, the kid sleeping on the train, the foster child sitting alone at the lunch table, the teenager with the too big jacket and the duct-tape shoes. Don't walk past. Don't assume someone else is handling it. Someone else is never handling it. That's the lie we tell ourselves so we can keep walking. Stop. Ask if they're okay. Listen when they answer. And believe them when they tell you hard truths. Even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. She held up Emma's photograph so 200 people could see a 5-year-old girl with pigtails and yellow ribbons and a gap-toothed smile. My sister died because I wasn't fast enough. But Sophie lived because I ran. 9 children survived because Ghost stopped his motorcycle. 12 facilities closed because Tank made phone calls. 200 kids found better placements because people in this room chose to see what the system had chosen to ignore. That's what visibility does. It saves lives. The room went silent for 1 heartbeat. Then Sophie started clapping her small hands, making a sound like rain on a window. Then Ghost, then Carmen, then Tank. Then all 200 of them standing and applauding a 14-year-old girl who had learned that being seen was worth every risk it carried. 1 year after the trial, Maya spoke at a national child welfare conference. 400 professionals, social workers, policymakers, legislators, advocates, the people who built the systems and the people who were supposed to maintain them. She had written her speech with Carmen's help, practiced it 50 times. Standing at the podium, looking at 400 faces, she put the notes down and spoke from the place that mattered. I was invisible for 18 months. Hundreds of people walked past me every day, saw me sleeping on trains, saw a 12-year-old girl with a no adult and no bag and duct tape on her shoes, and decided I was someone else's responsibility. Some of those people are in this room right now. The audience shifted. I'm not saying that to shame you, I'm saying it to wake you up. Because right now in this city there is a child sleeping somewhere dangerous. There is a kid locked in a room for asking questions. There is a teenager being moved through a system that treats children like inventory and adults like customers. And you are choosing not to see them. Her voice hardened. Stop choosing blindness. Stop telling yourselves that someone more qualified will handle it. Stop accepting explanations that let you sleep at night. Start asking uncomfortable questions. Start believing children when they tell you they're being hurt. Start demanding accountability from every person who claims to protect children while profiting from their suffering. She looked at the social workers in the front row. You have power. Use it. File reports even when your supervisors tell you it's not worth the trouble. Document everything. Photograph injuries. Record inconsistencies. And when they fire you for speaking up because they will know that you did what Sandra Whitfield did. What I did. You chose visibility over comfort. You chose children over careers. You chose the hard right over the easy wrong. The applause was slow at first. Then it built. Then everyone was standing. 12 social workers approached her afterward. Said they had been looking away. Said they had been choosing comfort. Said tomorrow they would start choosing differently. That's all I'm asking, Maya said. Do better tomorrow than you did today. 1 day at a time, 1 child at a time. That's how systems change. Not from the top, from the people who are willing to lose their jobs to protect 1 kid. 2 years after the trial, Maya turned 16. She had grown 3 inches, gained 28 pounds, Her shoulder had healed completely, though it ached when it rained a barometric reminder of the day everything changed. She was a straight-A student. Had friends, had a family, had a room with a window that opened and a door that was never locked, and a desk where Emma's photograph sat in a frame Carmen had bought next to a list of 9 names she would never forget. But she still woke sometimes at 4 in the morning. Still flinched when doors closed too hard. Still counted exits when she entered unfamiliar rooms. Still carried the photograph everywhere in every pocket and every bag, Emma's smile pressed against her body like a talisman. Dr. Prescott said that was normal. Said trauma leaves scars, and scars are permanent. They don't disappear. They don't heal into unblemished skin. They become part of you. Part of your story. The landscape of your body and your mind, forever altered by what happened to it. So, what's your story now? Dr. Prescott asked during a session. Maya thought about it for a long time. I'm the girl who ran. The girl who was invisible until she decided not to be. The girl who caught a falling child and broke herself and found a family in the wreckage. The girl who saved 9 children by refusing to forget their names when the people who were supposed to remember had chosen to erase them. That's a good story. It's not finished. Dr. Prescott smiled. The best stories never are. 3 years after the trial, Maya stood on the courthouse steps where she had testified. She was 17, a high school senior, applying to colleges to study social work, planning to enter the system that had failed her and rebuild it from the inside, one policy at a time, one child at a time, with the knowledge of someone who had lived on both sides of the institutional wall and knew exactly where the cracks were. Sophie was 8 now, growing fast, still visiting every month, still calling Maya her hero, even though Maya kept telling her that heroes don't exist, just people who choose to act when acting is terrifying. The 9 rescued children stayed in touch. A group chat that never went silent. Video calls where they caught up on lives that were slowly and imperfectly becoming something worth living. Annual reunions at the Iron Wolves clubhouse, where they sat in a circle and told stories that no one outside the circle could fully understand. They were bound together by something stronger than friendship, stronger than shared experience. They were bound by the knowledge that someone had remembered their names when the world had decided they were worth forgetting. Ghost and Carmen had fostered 2 more children since Maya, both temporary placements while the parents got the help they needed. Both returned home stronger because Ghost and Carmen understood something that Parkside had never understood. That every child deserves to be seen. That family is a choice you make every morning when you wake up. That the best thing you can do for a broken kid is show up consistently and let them decide at their own pace whether you can be trusted. Maya had helped with both foster placements. Had sat with frightened children on their first night in a strange house and told them what Ghost had told her on the sidewalk on Anderson Street. You're safe here. Nobody is locking any doors. And if you need something at 3 in the morning, you can walk down the hall and someone will be awake because that's what this family does. The first child, a 10-year-old boy named Kevin, who had been removed from a neglectful household, had looked at Maya's scar on her shoulder and asked how she got it. Maya told him the short version. The real version. And Kevin had nodded slowly the way children nod when they recognize that the person talking to them has lived something similar and said, "You're like me, you understand." "I understand," Maya said. And it gets better, not perfect, not fast, but better. She had watched Kevin leave, 3 months later return to his mother, who had completed treatment, who had fought for her son the way the system was supposed to help her fight. Maya had cried the day he left. Not from sadness, from something more complicated. From the bittersweet recognition that sometimes the best outcome is watching someone walk away from you towards something better. The second child, a 13-year-old girl named Elise, who reminded Maya so much of herself that it physically hurt, had stayed for 4 months. Elise had the same guarded eyes, the same measured movements, the same instinct to test every kindness for hidden conditions. Maya had been patient with her in the way that only someone who has been that exact kind of frightened can be patient. Had given Elise space when she needed it and presence when she needed that instead. Had shown her through consistency and time in the simple act of showing up day after day without fail that some promises hold. When Elise left to join an aunt who had traveled from another state to claim her, she had hugged Maya at the door and whispered, "You made me believe people can be good. That's the hardest thing I've ever believed, but I believe it now." Maya had stood in the doorway after Elise's aunt drove away and thought about Ghost, about how he had given her his vest on a sidewalk and changed her understanding of what was possible, about how she was now doing the same thing for other children, passing the gift forward, creating a chain of visibility that extended outward from Anderson Street in directions she would never fully map. Director Diane Mercer had 8 years remaining on her sentence. Maya rarely thought about her anymore. The woman who had tried to erase children had been erased herself, living in a cell that measured 6 feet by 8 feet, the exact dimensions of the reflection room where she had locked children for asking questions about their grandmothers. The symmetry was not lost on anyone. Maya stood on those courthouse steps and looked at the city that had ignored her for 18 months. Looked at the streets where she had slept hungry and cold and invisible. Looked at the subway stations where hundreds of people had walked past her every day without pausing to wonder why a 12-year-old girl was sleeping on a train at 2 in the afternoon. And she thought about the children who were still out there, right now, today, sleeping in places no child should sleep, locked in rooms by people who called it therapy, being moved in vans by people who called it placement, waiting for someone to stop, waiting for someone to ask if they were okay, waiting for someone to believe them. "I see you," Maya said. "Not to the city, not to the buildings, to the invisible children. The ones curled up in corners, the ones counting ceiling tiles in concrete rooms, the ones who have been told they are disturbed when they are grieving, the ones who have been told they are problems when they are people. I see you and I'm coming. We're all coming. Because I know what invisible feels like. I know what it feels like to stand on a sidewalk and watch the world walk past like you don't exist. And I know what it feels like when someone finally stops, when someone sees you, when someone decides that your name is worth remembering and your story is worth hearing and your life is worth fighting for. So hold on. Be brave a little longer. Hold on to whatever you have. A photograph, a name, a memory of someone who loved you before the system got involved. Hold on to it and don't let go, because someone is coming. Someone who will stop. Someone who will look at you and see a person, not a case number. Someone who will believe you when you tell the truth, even when the truth is ugly and complicated and makes powerful people uncomfortable. I promise. Because that's what happened to me. A stranger stopped his motorcycle. A club showed up at dawn. A city listened. A judge signed an order. A family chose me. And everything changed. She touched the scar on her left palm, the one from the razor wire at Parkside. The scar that proved she had climbed out of a locked bathroom at midnight and survived. That proved escape was possible. That proved the walls were never as permanent as the people who built them wanted you to believe. Then she touched her right shoulder, the one she had destroyed catching Sophie. The one that ached when it rained and reminded her every time the weather changed that she had once been brave enough to run toward a falling child when 4 adults walked past. The scar that proved saving someone was worth breaking yourself. That proved visibility with all its terror and vulnerability and pain was always worth the risk. "This is for Emma," Maya whispered. "For the 9, for the 200 who found better placements when the facilities closed. For every child who has ever been invisible, and every child who is invisible right now. I'm making sure the world sees you. I'm making sure your names are spoken. I'm making sure that when you fall, someone runs. Because that's what the people who stop do. They run when everyone else walks past. They speak when everyone else stays silent. They see when everyone else looks away. They choose the hard, uncomfortable, career-ending, bone-breaking act of caring about someone who has been deemed unworthy of care." Maya Hale had been invisible for 18 months, had slept under overpasses and eaten from dumpsters and been locked in concrete rooms and called crazy by people who profited from her silence. Had been starved and medicated and dismissed and erased by a system that treated children like problems to be solved rather than people to be loved. But she had caught a falling child, had spoken to a stranger, had trusted when trust should have been impossible, and in doing so, had found 9 children imprisoned their captor, changed the law, closed 12 facilities, and proved that one voice, even a small voice, even a voice that shakes and cracks and almost gives up, can be loud enough to shatter the silence that powerful people depend upon. She had been invisible. She would never be invisible again, and she would spend every day of the rest of her life making sure no other child had to be. The best stories Maya had learned don't end. They find new voices to carry them forward. New strangers who choose to stop when the world says keep walking. New children who discover that their names matter and their truths deserve to be heard, and their lives are worth more than the budgets and bureaucracies and clinical vocabularies that try to reduce them to case numbers. This was her story. But it was also Ghost's story, and Carmen's, and Tank's, and Reaper's, and Doc's, and Jennifer's, and Sophie's. It was Brittany's story, and Marcus's, and Jessica's, and Timothy's, and Lily's, and David's, and Angela's, and Brandon's, and Christina's. It was the story of Rebecca Thornton, who saw the van and finally spoke. Of Sandra Whitfield, who kept the receipts. Of Frank Garrison, who noticed children in a garage in December. It was the story of everyone who had ever been invisible and everyone who had ever chosen to see them. And it was still being written. Not by one person, by all of them. Together. Visible. Unfinished. Unbreakable. Carrying each other forward through a world that too often looks away, proving that the simple act of stopping, of seeing, of believing is enough to change everything, the way the best stories always do.